Okay, we're going to start with a quote from selections from the writings of Abdu'l-Baha. And that quote is right here. The world of humanity has two wings. One is woman and the other men. Not until both wings are equally developed can the bird fly. Should one wing remain weak, flight is impossible. Not until the world of woman becomes equal to the world of men in the acquisition of virtues and perfections can success and prosperity be attained as they ought to be. Okay, so to me this is clearly saying mankind as a species has two wings. One's man, one's woman, and both wings need to be as strong as each other for mankind to be able to fly. Okay, we're going to look at another quote from Abdu'l-Baha in The Promulgation of Universal Peace. It's a short quote, and it's right here. So Abdu'l-Baha says, therefore, as woman advances toward the degree of man in power and privilege, with the right of vote and control in human government, most assuredly war will cease, for woman is naturally the most devoted and staunch advocate of international peace. So, in other places in the writings, Abdu'l-Baha talks about when women are in government, they're much less prone to war because they don't want to put the children that they've birthed and raised into any sort of problem. So, this is a common theme in the writing, but I particularly want to zone in on this section right here, where control in human government is one of the specifics that he's outlined. So we're going to have a little look into what that may mean. Okay, so to look at what Abdu'l-Baha's referring to as the government, we're going to look at a quote in The Secret of Divine Civilization. So I'll scroll down here. Here it is. Here's the quote we're going to look at. So, government can be used as a sort of broad term, but a lot of people don't know what the different parts of a federal government are. So we have a legislative, an executive, and a judiciary. So there's three branches in a federal government. And Abdu'l-Baha is going to talk here a little bit about that. The state is moreover based upon two potent forces, the legislative and the executive. The focal center of the executive power is the government, while that of the legislative is the learned. And if this later great support and pillar should prove defective, how is it conceivable that the state should stand? So this book covers a lot of different things in Abdu'l-Baha, talking about how the government of Iran could have been improved in his time. But what I'm focusing on here is that he's singling out that the focal center of the executive power is the government. So the executive power is the side that governs politics. The legislative power makes the laws. So we have a legislative body, which would be, the House or the Senate or whatever, the parliament of a country. If we look at America or Western countries, Australia, etc., you got that, and then you've got the executive power, which would be the president or the prime minister, etc., etc. So going back to that other quote we looked at that said women should be in charge of government, from my understanding, Abdu'l-Baha is telling us that we need women in charge of the executive branch. So that branch which in Western governments we would look at as the prime ministers or presidents, etc. So just using your critical thinking and an unbiased view of what I'm saying, if you agree with that or not, this is my understanding of what it's talking about. So I'm going to now go on to show how this can be applied to an even greater idea. Okay, so to look at this even greater idea, we're going to look at the Will and Testament of Abdu'l-Baha. So I'm going to read this quote here concerning the House of Justice, and we'll start with that. It's a bit longer than the other quotes that we've looked at so far, but let's get into this. And now, concerning the House of Justice, which God hath ordained as the source of all good and freed from all error, it must be elected by universal suffrage, that is, by the believers. Its members must be manifestations of the fear of God, and daysprings of knowledge and understanding, must be steadfast in God's faith and the well-wishes of all mankind. By this house is meant the universal house of justice. That is, in all countries, a secondary house of justice must be instituted, and these secondary houses of justice must elect members of the universal one. Unto this body all things must be referred. It enacteth all ordinances and regulations that are not to be found in the explicit holy texts. By this body all the difficult problems are to be resolved, and the guardian of the cause of God is its sacred head and distinguished member for life of that body. Should he not attend in person its deliberations, he must appoint one to represent him. Should any of the members commit a sin injurious to the common weal, the guardian of the cause of God hath at his own discretion the right to expel him, whereupon the people must elect another in his stead. This house of justice enacteth the laws, and the government enforceth them. The legislative body must reinforce the executive. The executive must aid and assist the legislative body, so that through close union and harmony of these two forces, the foundation of fairness and justice may become firm and strong, that all the regions of the world may become even as paradise itself. So there's a lot going on in here, but let's just zone in on this last bit here, where clearly we're told that there's two bodies that have to work together, and that when they do, the regions of the world may become paradise itself, or even as paradise itself. Now, we're told that the world can't become, we can't achieve world peace or world unity until there's women in the executive body. Now, this is a very tough subject, and it's perplexed Baha'is for decades since the passing of the Guardian, because the Guardian left no will and testament, and so there was no clear appointing of anybody to succeed him. Now, I want to be very clear, I'm in no way claiming to be a guardian. I'm proposing an idea of something that I've seen in these writings, and I'm showing you and asking you to use your critical thinking and an open conscience to see whether what I'm saying lines up with the writings. This is about creating an institution where women can be that second branch to mankind, so that the legislative and executive branches can work in unison, they can reinforce each other, and work in union and harmony together as the two forces for the foundation of fairness and justice. So the perplexing part is, does the writings give us any way to make this, as many would see that it's going against what the Guardian says? But I'm going to get into where the Guardian actually gives us permission to create this branch. And, well, just again, the words here, what the Abdu'l-Baha have said, are communicating that the executive branch is the government. So the House of Justice enacteth the laws, and the government enforceth them. So the legislative body, which is the House of Justice, so the House of Justice are there to create laws, and there needs to be an executive branch, which would be the government. The executive branch has to enforce them. And we know from that other quote that women must control the government, and we know that even from here, the government is the executive. So just to show that we are meant to have an executive, legislative, and a court system, in this same document, the Will and Testament of Abdu'l-Baha, another short quote right here talks about that we need a supreme tribunal. So should differences arise, they shall be amicably and conclusively settled by the Supreme Tribunal. That shall include members from all the governments and peoples of the world. So a Supreme Tribunal is like the Supreme Court in America, but we're talking about on a global level. It's the court system, which is absolutely separate from the legislative and executive power. One of the things that is a problem in tyrannical governments is all these powers get brought together into one body. So there's a quote in the Dawnbreakers, in the Bill's narrative, where pointing out one of the problems was that the over-centralization of power. So he had power of life and death without appeal over all members of his household and of his court, whether civil or military. The right to take life was vested in him alone, and so were all the functions of government, legislative, executive, and judicial. His royal prerogative was limited by no written restraint whatsoever. So clearly we're told in the writings that we need these three separate branches to be functioning. These are very real, and they need to exist within the Baha'i faith. So we need to create a world Baha'i court system that functions separately from the House of Justice. The Universal House of Justice cannot be judge, jury, and executioner. Its role is to create laws, not to execute them, and not to be the court system. So these are things that we need to look at, and I'm showing you what they are out of the writings. So looking at a quote that's going to describe how the Universal House of Justice has the authority to create this executive branch and a Supreme Tribunal, a Baha'i World Court. World Order of Baha'u'llah, Shoghi Effendi, he says, this is quite a long quote that I'm going to go through. Divorced from the institution of guardianship, the World Order of Baha'u'llah would be mutilated and permanently deprived of the hereditary principle, as Abdu'l-Baha has written, has been invariably upheld by the law of God. In all the divine dispensations, he states in a tablet addressed to the followers of the faith in Persian, the eldest son hath been given extraordinary distinctions. Even the station of prophethood hath been his birthright. So I'm going to continue reading down this line, but I'm going to stop right there before I go on to say that the way I'm reading this is that fulfilling this birthright, the hereditary principle, is a fulfillment of God's law, which has gone through all the dispensations. But we are now in a new dispensation. So this fulfilled what had to be fulfilled, yet the new dispensation, we don't have any more prophetic dispensations. So we're out of the prophet cycle, right? Right here where it says, even the station of prophethood hath been his birthright. But in the new era, in the new cycle, we're not going to have this male lineage descendant to be the high priest of the faith, because we have no more priesthood. Anyway, so I'll continue. Without such an institution, so he's said that it's going to be mutilated without the guardian, and that the hereditary principle's gone. But now he's talking about an institution. Without such an institution, the integrity of the faith would be imperiled, and the stability of the entire fabric would be gravely endangered. Its prestige would suffer. The means required to enable it to take a long and uninterrupted view over a series of generations would be completely lacking, and the necessary guidance to define the sphere of legislative action of its elected representatives would be totally withdrawn. So what this is saying here, whether people want to deal with it or not, is that because we don't have this institution that the guardianship is, that the legislative action of the elected representatives, meaning the House of Justice, is lacking. It's completely lacking. So it can't take an uninterrupted view over a series of generations, and it's missing the necessary guidance to define the sphere of the legislative action. So now, I'm not trying to say that the House of Justice isn't the House of Justice. There's only one universal House of Justice, and it's the one that sits on Mount Carmel and is elected by the Baha'is around the world. This is not an attack on that institution of the faith. I'm pointing out that there needs to be more. So I'll continue. Severed from the no less essential institution of the Universal House of Justice, the same system of the will of Abdu'l-Baha would be paralyzed in its action and would be powerless to fill in those gaps which the author of the Kitab-i-Aqdas has deliberately left in the body of his legislative and administrative ordinances. So, to continue, I'm not saying that the Universal House of Justice is not the Universal House of Justice. We see that we need it just as importantly as we need the executive branch. It goes on to say, he is the interpreter of the word of God. Abdu'l-Baha referring to the functions of the guardian of the faith. So it's the functions of the guardianship of the executive branch to be the interpreters. Using in his will the very term which he himself had chosen when refuting the argument of the covenant breakers, who had challenged his right to interpret the utterances of Baha'u'llah. After him, he adds, will succeed the firstborn of his lineal descendants, the mighty stronghold. He further explains, shall remain impregnable and safe through obedience to him who is the guardian of the cause of God. So we need to be obedient to him. No problem. I'm using his writings to show the things that I'm talking about. It is incumbent upon the members of the House of Justice, upon the Agsan and Afnan, the hands of the cause of God, to show their obedience, submissiveness, and subordination unto the guardian of the cause of God. Here we go. It is incumbent upon the members of the Universal House of Justice. Baha'u'llah, on the other hand, declares, in the 8th leaf of the Exalted Paradise, to take counsel together regarding those things which have not outwardly been revealed in the book, and to enforce that which is agreeable to them. So this is really the line that I'm going to zoom in on. Maybe I'll finish the whole paragraph and we'll come back to that line. God will verily inspire them with whatsoever he willeth, and he verily is the provider, the omniscient. Unto the most holy book, the Kitab-i-Aqdas, Abdu'l-Baha states in his will, everyone must turn, and all that is not expressly recorded therein must be referred to the Universal House of Justice. That which this body, whether unanimously or by majority, doth carry, that is verily the truth and the purpose of God himself. Whoso doth deviate therefrom is verily of them that love discord, has shown forth malice, and turned away from the Lord of the covenant. So, the important part here is that the House of Justice can take counsel together regarding things which have not outwardly been revealed, and that's on things that are not expressly recorded in the writings. So what I'm going to suggest is there's nothing expressly recorded in the writings about what to do if Shoghi Effendi does not appoint a guardian. But we're told that the House has the authority to create a law that can deal with that. And so it's completely within their sphere of power as far as making laws to institute an executive branch that is made up of women. No problem, because the faith has been mutilated, meaning that mutilation doesn't need to be a bad thing, but simply that cord is cut. There is no more lineal male descendancy, no more single men in the executive branch. It's not a man ruling over things anymore. The future is 5 women sitting in the executive branch. Now, choosing the number 5 to represent the barb, because the number 9 for the House of Justice represents Bahai. And where we see that it needs to be a majority, so when creating laws in the House of Justice, the majority out of a 9 count is 5. So 5 people need to agree that the law should be carried. Better to be unanimous, but sometimes things need to be expressly done. And with the executive branch, if there's a minimum of 5 seating there, then it would need to be a majority of 3 to execute on what to do with those laws, to administer them. Now, just as with the House of Justice, it's not limited to 9. And so the House of Guardianship doesn't need to be limited to 5. But I'm proposing that 5 to represent the barb, and because 9 represents the number of Bahai or Baha'u'llah. So we have a balance there to represent the twin manifestations, who are also the wings on which mankind is going to be propelled into the future. So I hope to have shown here that the House of Justice clearly has the authority to create this executive branch. It's within their mandate to create laws. I also hope that I've shown, according to Bahai principles, that to create a female executive branch would be in absolute agreement with the teachings of the faith. We need a balance of men and women in the world. If we have a look, just searching on the internet, I've seen many people complain that the Baha'is seem hypocritical because we talk about the equality of men and women, yet women are not allowed to serve in our highest seats of authority. And this is clearly a very elegant solution where men and women both sit in the highest seats, but they have separate roles. They're not the same. So although they're equal, they're clearly different, which is a problem that the species is facing at the moment. People can't define the difference between male and female. But within the laws of God, we know that men and women are different, yet we need equal right, separate roles. There is a male role and a female role. And so this can be represented in the government. So I'll go on to use one more quote about the House of Justice being men. Selections from the writings of Abdu'l-Bahá. Abdu'l-Bahá says, the House of Justice, however, according to the explicit text of the law of God, is confined to men. This for all wisdom of the Lord gods, which will ere long be made manifest as clearly as the sun at high noon. So the Bahai world are waiting for a day where the wisdom of the House of Justice, being only men, will be made manifest as clearly as the sun at high noon. So I'm presenting that this is the wisdom. The wisdom is that men and women need to be equal for the world to be able to become the veritable paradise. And so the House of Justice being men means that there must be an equal position for women to hold. Again, I'm appealing to your critical thinking and for you to understand this has nothing to do with me. This has everything to do with creating a world administrative order in which the government has equal positions for men and women. I'm going to close with one more quote from the Promulgation of Universal Peace. by Abdu'l-Baha. And in that quote, Abdu'l-Baha says, "The world of humanity consists of two parts, male and female. Each is the complement of the other. Therefore, if one is defective, the other will necessarily be incomplete, and perfection cannot be attained. There is a right hand and a left hand in the human body, functionally equal in service and administration. If either proves defective, the defect will naturally extend to the other by involving the completeness of the whole. For accomplishment is not normal unless both are perfect. If we say one hand is deficient, we prove the inability and incapacity of the other. For single-handed, there is no full accomplishment. Just as physical accomplishment is complete with two hands, so man and woman, the two parts of the social body, must be perfect. It's not natural that either should remain undeveloped, and until both are perfected, the happiness of the human world will not be realized." So, Abdu'l-Baha clearly again here talks about the need for the female hand of mankind to be fully involved in administration, and goes on to say that the happiness of the human world will not be realized. I think it's imperative that the Baha'is lead by example. Truly, we're meant to be building a world administrative order to unify the world under, with God at its center. And so creating this female executive branch is the only just answer in my sight. Thanks for listening. If you want to know more about what I see the world order of Baha'u'llah should look like, check out the other video on my channel. Thank you.